You're listening to a podcast of spurious morality.
Disappointed at your lack of Pertwee impression.
Good grief.
There we go.
Madam, what year is this?
Hello and welcome to a podcast of spurious morality. I'm Johnston and with me this week is Connor. Hello.
Hello, it's nice to be back.
It's great to have you back. I've been trying to convince Connor to start podcasting more regularly again for quite a while, and it was the Third Doctor Adventures what finally done it. So that's what I've got to talk about now. And that's okay, because we like the Third Doctor Adventures. We like Tim Treloar and all that kind of thing. So it's good to be doing this. And we've not sort of picked up we've not picked up a Big Finish series to sort of cover for a while. So the plan is we're going to go through, over the course of a few podcasts, all of the Third Doctor Adventures to date. And by the time we finish, there'll probably be more. But we are going to start, as tradition would dictate, with the first set, which is a bit of a curio, because obviously the big thing about the first set is it has narration, and it's a bit strange. It kind of takes the format Big Finish were using for the early adventures time and does that, but it has Tim Treloar narrating in his own voice, which is sort of close to his Third Doctor impression, but not quite there. So it's all a bit odd. So the first two stories do have this kind of weird narration. So that's Prisoners of the Lake, and it is The Havoc of Empires. So we'll start with Prisoner of the Lake. It's all right. It's a nice little introduction. The one thing that sort of struck me straight away, so I listened to this last week for the first time in a few years. The first thing that really struck me about it was because of the narration, the Brigadier gets to have a bit of a cameo. He's not actually in it, and we're quite a way off John Culshaw being the Brigadier at this point, but the narration enables Mike Yates to phone the Brigadier and report in and that kind of thing. So I thought that was quite sweet. It was kind of they were kind of experimenting with a way of, well, how do we get characters that aren't here in? And I guess that's a good thing. Moving on to the story itself, it's fairly simple, sort of unit era fodder. This could go somewhere in not season 8 because it doesn't have the master, but season 9 maybe, and it's sort of that the whole unit family's not quite there, but the Doctor, Joe and Mike Yates are kind of doing the thing. I've not got a ton to say about this one, but it feels very slow paced. I was actually struck by how long it took the Doctor to get into the story at all. I think there's a solid 10 minutes in episode 1 before the Doctor's actually introduced, which is all well and good. I can take that normally, but this is the first story in the first set, introducing what was really Big Finish's first major recast. And we've got Tim Treloar's voice narrating as normal, but we don't hear him as the Doctor until 10 minutes in. And I'm not entirely sure that was the right choice to make, because you could listen to Tim Treloar's narration and you could go, well, it doesn't sound that much like the Third Doctor. Is that what I'm in for? And give up before you actually hear his Third Doctor, which is actually really good from the very start. So that's a bit of a quibble I have with this one. Otherwise, like I say, decent enough story, kind of covers that unit era ground. It's nice to have Mike Yates in these couple of stories, and a shame that we never see him again afterwards. What do you think about this one, Connor?
Well, I'll start up by talking about the narration because, as you say, that's the big difference between this set and all the ones that come after it. Is this set is narrated and the following sets are not. So it's such a Big Finish thing. We're so used to, as Big Finish fans and Big Finish listeners, to full cast adventures that are just pure audio plays and there's no narration to them whatsoever. And so when narration does turn up on a story, we sort of lose our minds a little bit and go, "Oh my goodness, it's narrated, therefore it's lesser." And that's exclusive to being a Big Finish fan. I think that is not something that anyone who listens to, a lot of Radio 4 drama or a lot of other produced drama is. It's hardly ever commented on, not that I see anyway. I'm talking in absolutes here, and someone will at some stage pop up and say, actually, you're wrong." But um, it's not that intrusive. I actually quite liked some of it in The Prisoners of the Lake because thinking back to the John Pertwee stories on TV, quite a lot of the establishing shots, in my head, it's a Pertwee era thing to have an establishing shot of some blasted heat somewhere that sweeps across this landscape and then zooms in on a building or something like that. And this narration sort of does that on audio, almost, and I thought it helped pace this more like a Third Doctor story. It definitely slows the pace of the adventure down a bit, and I don't think it's just as frenetic as some other Big Finish stories can be. But I don't mind it. I think my main complaint about the narration is that I wish somebody other than Tim Treloar had done it, because I've heard Tim Treloar speaking in his natural voice, and he has quite a strong Welsh accent that I don't think is wholly present in this. I think he's toning that down a bit for the narration. Not just as much as he tones it down when he's playing the Doctor, but it's definitely not just as present as when he's using his natural speaking voice. And the voice that he does for the narration does sound quite close to his Third Doctor voice. So I don't mind the narration. I'm not mad that it's there. As I say, I think it does at times have quite a beneficial effect on the story. I just wish somebody other than Tim Treloar had done it. We mention it quite frequently, from what I remember on the podcast, but the Black Hole, the Second Doctor early adventure, used David Warner to narrate. I think that would have been a better idea to have someone like David Warner or somebody who's not part of the main cast to narrate the story and let the main cast do their thing just as their characters. But
I was just about to jump in with exactly that. Like, it brings to mind the Black Hole, which is the best
Yeah.
the early adventures ever did it, because not just because they had somebody else doing it. I mean, they had David Warner doing it, but
yeah,
it just
but
works better.
it does, and it makes it sound distinct, and you're not having to do it's not a huge amount of mental legwork, but you don't have to do, oh, that's Fraser Hines talking as Jamie versus that's Fraser Hines narrating, or, in this case, that's Tim Treloar narrating versus that's his Doctor. There were times when I wasn't initially sure whether I was listening to the Doctor or whether I was listening to the narrator, and that is an issue. But it's not a huge one, and the narration's not a big thing. So story itself, this is actually the first time I'd heard this first set. I had, for all I've just said about narration being not a bad thing, I'd never actually done this set before. But I really enjoyed it. I think Prisoners of the Lake, it's really not a bad opening story. It is a bit smaller scale than some of the other Third Doctor adventures and some of Big Finish's other stories are. But that's not a bad thing for an opening story. I don't mind the first story in a range, and the first story, particularly with a new actor playing the Doctor, being a bit more straightforward and a bit more. I think at times it feels a little bit timid, but as I say, I don't mind that because it is the first story, and it's almost like baby steps, to build them up into it and see how things work before they do something more ambitious. So yeah, I quite liked it. It's almost like a real time survival thriller, and that's the type of story that I quite enjoy. There's a really cool bit, and it stuck out to me as a really cool story moment, and just a really cool in-world mechanic, where there's this alien intelligence that gets recorded onto a magnetic tape. Whenever it's Carolyn Seymour's character Frida goes down into the archaeological dig site under the lake, and she records herself talking to the sentry robot, and its intelligence gets recorded on the magnetic tape and manages to leap from the tape into the excavator suit, and it manages to take it over. Then I thought that was really cool. It was just a really nice element to the story, and a good way of turning that excavator suit into a threat. I just thought it was really cool. It's good to have Mike Yates involved. He feels oddly underused in it though, and again, maybe the story feels a bit timid at times, where there's not a great deal of stuff for Mike to do at times. His whole wee bit about tracking down the artifacts feels a little bit tacked on just to give him something to do. But I suppose it's cool that he's there. As you say, we never really get him in the Third Doctor adventures again. But yeah, he's of the era, and something that I'm going to talk about a little bit more so in the next story. But from what I remember, the whole point of this range wasn't to do stories with the Third Doctor. It was to continue to do stories with Katie Manning and the other Third Doctor era cast, but particularly Katie Manning. So there's times in these, more so in some stories than others, where Joe and Katie Manning are the lead character and the Doctor's a bit more background. And I think that was by design and that was by intention, because the original intention behind the Third Doctor adventures, as far as I know, just remembering what was said at the time and what's been said in the years since, is that it was less so to bring the Third Doctor in as an active character, although that was obviously an element as well, but more so to do full cast stories with Katie Manning as Joe and some of the other Third Doctor era cast members who were still alive and still recording with Big Finish. So I think, just going back to what you'd said about the Doctor taking a longer time to turn up, maybe that was deliberate, because, as I say, the focus was not so much on the Doctor, but more on Joe. But I don't think that has survived the years. I think, or as time has gone on, the Doctor has become the more active character again. But I do think it's interesting listening back to these stories now, just how prominent Joe is in some of them, and how less prominent the Doctor is.
Quite interesting, because I suppose the first 10 minutes is very Mike heavy. I guess it's the Mike Yates bit, the first 10 minutes before the Doctor turns up, because the Doctor turns up with Joe
Yes.
10 minutes in. But that is interesting you should say that, because the final episode, Joe basically sits around an office and goes, "No, give the Doctor more time." And that's her entire contribution to the final quarter of the story.
That is true. That is very true.
So yeah, I can see where you're coming from. I can see, yes, they obviously
As I
had
say,
thought about it at some point.
it's
Um,
more a thing in the Havoc of Empires, which is the second story, and it's more of a thing again, I think, in the Hidden Realm. It's
yeah,
definitely more prominent in certain stories than others, but it does, to my mind, as you say, the first 10 minutes are very Mike heavy. It does, to my mind, sort of explain why the Doctor takes that little bit longer to turn up and isn't necessarily just as prominent as the other Doctors are in their stories. At times, not all the time, but at times.
yes. And from that point of view, it works. I suppose, listening to these in 2026, when we've had, how many sets are we on now? Is it 16, something like that?
There's a lot of
Um,
them. There's a
there's
lot.
a lot of them now. It's very easy to sort of forget that what this was replacing was essentially the Companion Chronicles. Um, like the Joe Grant Companion Chronicles, this is just the next stage of those, in the same way that the early adventures were replacing 60s Companion Chronicles. So yeah, I guess that does make a lot of sense. Like, these aren't really full cast Third Doctor adventures. These are Joe Grant, Mike Yates' Companion Chronicles. So yeah, that kind of works. But yeah, I kind of wish that have found a way to make Joe more of an active participant in this story.
Yes.
Because there's not a lot of her. I don't know. There seem to be quite a few sort of odd decisions that go into this one, and I don't mean from like a scripting point of view, an acting point of view, anything like that. That's actually all really good. It's a nice, engaging story. I feel like I'm sat here slagging it off when I like this. It's a good story. It just seems like a really odd way to launch this range. Um, yeah, if you threw it into like set 3 or 4 or whatever, I'd go, oh, yeah, it's another Third Doctor story. Great, enjoyed that. But because it is 1.1, it kind of gets that scrutiny. I guess,
They definitely haven't. They definitely haven't found their feet with it at this
no,
stage in this story.
yeah,
I don't think
uh,
so. Anyway.
yeah, absolutely. It's just when you sort of think about a lot of stuff, to be honest. I guess it's something that, to an extent, Russell T Davies established. You have the opening episode where it's a little bit lighter, but it's a bit showy-offy, and it does draw your audience in and that kind of thing. And Big Finish seem to have adopted that model quite a bit. The first episode of a series is a launch, it's a showcase, it's an event, here's a hint of what we're going to have more of going forward. And that's certainly not here. This is actually quite a bit, an obscure bit of Big Finish as far as it goes. But it's, like I say, it does the job. It's an enjoyable story, but I think it's an enjoyable story to me who's been listening to Big Finish for the best part of 2 decades. Um, I'm not entirely sure this is a quote unquote great jumping on point. Should we move on to the Havoc of Empires?
Yes, let's.
Yes, because I think actually the Havoc of Empires would make a cracking jumping on point. Um, I think it's a far better introductory to this range story. I can see why maybe they went with the more traditional Unity Earth-based Third Doctor adventure to get us going. But then we move on to this, and it's a lot of fun. It's quite light-hearted. There's less narration in it. To be honest, let's get this out of the way. There's not a lot of narration. It's really not as heavy as some people make out. But this one really drops it. But I think it's because the Doctor's actually out of action for a fair chunk of the story. Like this one, I can see the whole. It's not really Third Doctor. It's actually a Joe and Mike Yates adventure. Because the Doctor's accused of murder and basically sits in a room silently for a while and just gets brought out to be useful. This one's fun. This kind of blends a few styles. You've got a bit of a sci-fi Agatha Christie vibe going on, but it also slightly has some farcical things to it. It's quite funny in places. It's quite heavy on the continuity references, but it doesn't feel gratuitous. It's fun. I like the idea of the Delphons actually turning up and, a race that we've heard about previously. They mentioned in Spearhead from Space, I think. They turn up and sort of play not a huge part in the story, but they're there. We've got a decent enough bunch of characters, and it's your traditional let's find the murderer, but it's not the Doctor finding the murderer. It's mainly Joe with Mike helping as well. So that works quite nicely. It's a good Joe Grant story. This one is a great Joe Grant story. But yeah, it's just a good little play on styles, and I kind of wish they'd have launched with this one. Actually, it feels like it's a lot more hit the ground running, but it's still fairly small scale in terms of what Big Finish can and do and have produced. What do you think?
I really enjoyed it. I think I'm glad that it was in the later half of the set. I think I'm glad it's the second story because it is a definite improvement over Prisoners of the Lake. As you said, the narration is much toned down, and it immediately, for that, but for a few other reasons as well, it feels like a much more confident story, and it hits the ground running much better. Um, Now there are pacing issues. I think that first episode's very drawn out, and it takes the Doctor, Mike, and Joe a very long time to become active participants in the story. They're sort of mulling around and uh, killing a lot of time in the hangar and in the elevator before they actually get involved in the story and before the story actually kicks off. But once it does get going, I think it's great. I think Joe being centered in that more central main role, when she's pretending to be the security investigator, um, is brilliant. And as I said, I think that was the original intention in the Third Doctor adventures back at the beginning, or the original philosophy was to keep Katie Manning involved in Big Finish and in Doctor Who, and make Joe a more active player in these stories. Um, so you mentioned the continuity references. I do think they go a little bit overboard on that. There's at one stage, it feels like a little bit of a roll call of Third Doctor era races, and I agree with you. I think it's really cool that the Delphons appear and finally turn up. I think they could only appear in a narrated story because it's established on TV, and it's an element of this story as well, that the way they communicate is by wiggling their eyebrows and making facial expressions. And that would not work in a non-narrated story. So glad that was in this set, not one of the later ones that they appeared. But it's cool that it's a nice wee throwback to the Third Doctor's first story that they appear at last and we get to meet them. Um, but as I say, you're right. There's a lot of continuity references, and it did feel like a little bit of, oh look, look at this. We're in the Third Doctor's era at times because of that. But uh, yeah, I think great story. I love the whole sleuthing aspect of it. I love the Dr. Joe and Mike having to do the whole detective story thing in outer space. It's so Third Doctor to have two warring factions. It's such a Third Doctor era thing to have these two warring factions coming together um because of a wedding. Um that almost feels like it's harking off to the royal courts of Peladon, and you've got a big galactic corporation, which I know was an element in Third Doctor TV stories as well. Um, so that's very cool, and I I I just think the only thing that holds the story back is there's a couple of pacing issues where the first episode's very drawn out, and it takes a long time for the main trio of characters to become active. I think there's parts of the bit around the Delphones first appearing and having to learn how to communicate. Everyone who's listening to this is a Doctor Who nerd. There's a very high likelihood that they have seen Spearhead from space, and we all know how the Delphon bit is gonna end. Which is that it's when the Joe and the others are all gathered around the hologram. The Delphon is making its wiggly eye movements at them, and they can't work out what's happening. They don't know why it's pulling all these phases. They don't know why they can't hear the audio. Um, and we all know as listeners how that's going to end. It's going to end with them going and getting the Doctor and him coming and translating for them. But it takes a bit too long to get to that point for me. And I'm not a huge fan of stories doing that, where we as fans already know the answer to a question, and yet the audio still continues to ask the question. It just feels a little bit redundant. But there's a few times like that where a couple of moments just going a bit too long. But otherwise, that's a very small thing. It's otherwise a great story, and I really enjoyed it. Definitely the stronger of the two stories in this set.
I agree. And yeah, there's definitely an argument for sort of saving the best till last. I mean, to be honest, this set does exactly the right thing. It has a spacey story and it has an earthy story, and
Yes.
the second set does exactly the same. And I can't remember beyond the second set because I've not re-listened to those yet.
The
Um,
third and fourth sets do it as well. The first set that breaks the mold is volume 5 because there's 2 Earth-based stories in it, and that was because I wanted to make use of the Brigadier.
yes, fair enough. And then in volume 6, they send the Brigadier to space anyway. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, like I like Havoc of Empires. I've always liked it. It's a very fair point about, well, we know what the twist with the Delphons is going to be because they pop up in Spearhead, and we've done that. But it doesn't stop my amusement. I think it's part of the sort of farcical element that I mentioned earlier. It's like, well, we the audience, we know we've got a continuity reference on our hands here. Um, and yeah, that's fine. It works. It's a really enjoyable story. I reckon it would probably be a two-parter if it were made today. But I'd say the same about Prisoners of the Lake as well. I reckon
That's
you could.
that's fair, and I think that is part and parcel of having the narration because that automatically slows a story down.
Yes,
So it does.
but I think you could very reasonably sort of take probably 45 minutes out of each of these stories, and you're not going to lose a great deal. Not a criticism, because if you like the Pertwee era, you, on a very basic level, have to at least accept padding. Like, if you're a fan of the Third Doctor, padding is part of your life. Um,
We
um,
like the third. We really like the third Doctor, honestly.
we do. We do. But come on, the Time Monster Part 4. Half of Frontier in Space. Yeah, it's we'd be lying if we said it wasn't like that. An integral part of the Third Doctor's era is there's a lot of capture and escape. No, let's leave Pertwee alone now. Come on. Um, let's g- let's go to the Transcendence of Ephros then, which I believe you've given the title of bestest Third Doctor adventure ever.
I have. I'm a big fan of this particular one. So set 2, just as a whole, I think before we even start talking about the stories, it's worth talking about the set as a whole because I think this is a better jumping on point than Volume 1. I think it's a much better, as the 2 stories are leaps and bounds beyond the first 2 from set 1. Um, and I still think it's the strongest set overall, at least of the sets that had the 2 stories in. The only one that might give it a run for its money is, I think it's Volume 7, which is the Liz Shaw, Sarah Jane Smith one. But for me,
Yeah,
Volume 2 is the best place to start with the Third Doctor adventures. Because it sets the mold for what's to come. We lose the narration and we get wholly, full cast non-narrated stories. But they are 2 absolutely banging stories. And for anyone who's looking to start with the Third Doctor adventures, skip Volume 1, go straight to Volume 2. Is the advice that I
but
have.
then go back to Volume 1 and
Yes,
sort
do go
of
back to Volume 1,
yes,
but
yes.
Volume 2 is it's a favorite of mine, to tell the truth. Out of all of Big Finish, it was very early on for me getting into Big Finish, that I got this set, and I truthfully was not sure that I was going to enjoy somebody else playing a version of the Doctor. I wasn't on board with the recasting until I heard. I got the free episode that they released of the Transcendence of Airfrost, and I don't usually get those wee free episodes that they put out from time to time, and the wee try before you buy ones. But I listened to the first episode of the Transcendence of Airfrost and just got totally lost in it. I fully believed that this was the Third Doctor. I could picture Pertwee doing it very easily. Um, and I needed to know what went on and happened after that. So uh, as I say, it was very early on for me. I'd only got a couple of sets before I got this one. I'm a huge fan of the Third Doctor. He was the first classic Doctor that I watched, and I was really excited to hear, the Third Doctor in audio. It just wasn't convinced that I would like somebody else playing him. But listened to the first episode of Transcendence, loved it, got the set, and it's probably the one that I go back and revisit the most out of the whole range. I am a massive fan of both of these stories.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, actually. I think that there's a confidence here there isn't in the first set. Like, the first set is very obviously them going, because Trelaw was the first major recast, wasn't he? I certainly can't think of anything else. Like, in
I'm
terms of
trying to.
Doctor or companion.
You could make an argument that the first and second Doctors being done in the Companion Chronicles by Peter Purves and William Russell and Fraser Hines,
Yeah.
because the Third Doctor adventures and the early adventures sort of existed in parallel for a very long time. And it's up in the air, I think, whether or not you regard the first and second Doctors as actually recast or not by with those actors. But I can't think of anyone else.
This
I
is the
think I
first time someone's been brought in outside to play a
yeah, to
mate. I know,
play.
like, I know we've had a few since, like, obviously we got a fair few, first Doctor companions. We've had Barbara, we've had Dodo, and,
Mhm.
Katarina even.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't think of
I
anything
think you're
else. Like,
right.
yeah. I
I'm
so I
actually
think
I've actually just been checking the dates. This is something to touch on as well. I've just been checking the dates on these releases. Volume 1 was released in 2015. But Tim Treloar had played the Doctor 2 years earlier because he plays the Doctor in The Light at the End, and I think that's the first time he appears there.
yes.
He hadn't played the Doctor before that, but I'm surprised that there was such a long gap between that and the first set of Third Doctor adventures coming out. He does have a little cameo in The Defectors, which was the first of the Locum Doctors trilogy. The one where the seventh Doctor comes back and has an adventure. He has a Third Doctor adventure with Joe. Um, and Tim Treloar has like one line right at the very end. It might even just be one word right at the end, but he is in it and he does play the Third Doctor in it. Um, but that was earlier in 2015, and the Third Doctor adventures were already on the cards by then. So I'm surprised that having recast the Third Doctor for The Light at the End, looking back, that it took so long for him to get a full set of stories. But I'm very glad he did, obviously. I don't know how long these stories were in the works, before they actually came out, whether that was ongoing from 2013 or not, and whether it was something that was simmering away in the background. But am I right in saying that he got it off the back of Dark Eyes? Because he plays the Time Lord President in Dark Eyes. And
Um,
even in that, you're listening to him and his voice does sound very John Pertwee.
I thought it was Destination Nerva. I seem to remember reading somewhere that it was actually Tom Baker that turned around and went, "He sounds just like John Pertwee." Uh,
Okay.
I could be wrong there. I could
That
have
would make
totally made
sense.
that up, but you know what? It's such a lovely one of those fan myths. I'm happy to perpetuate it.
It's nice to
Um,
believe.
yes, yes. And if it's good enough for Tom Baker, it is good enough for all the listeners at home.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. Um,
Do
but yeah,
you want to talk?
well,
Oh,
I think
sorry,
there
go
was
ahead.
a real, yeah, I think there's a real nervousness about introducing a recast Doctor now, and I think that's why it took so long and why we got these little cameos leading into it. I guess from that point of view, they actually handled it really well. But then you can hear that nervousness in the first set with the narration and everything else. It you can tell they're just not really sure what they want to do with it. And you don't get that feeling with the second set. So, Transcendence of Ephros, you go straight into it. It's like, well, hang on. We don't need the Earth stuff. We don't need Mike Yates. It's a shame we didn't get any more Mike Yates, by the way. It's a real shame Richard Franklin's only in that first set. Um, but we don't we don't need any of that. We're actually going to go and we're going to tell our very own confident, set somewhere in season 10, Doctor Who story that is not your typical Third Doctor era type thing. And we're ditching the narration, and Joe Grant is going to feature very, very prominently, but so is the Doctor.
Yes.
And it's a cracking story. Like, the first 3 episodes are an absolutely fantastic story. It rattles along at a great pace. It sets up a very believable Third Doctor world. Like, this could be a Malcolm Hulke story. It's definitely got the sort of colony in space type vibe about it, or even Frontier in Space, which is not a bad thing. I already mentioned Frontier in Space drags a bit, and Colony in Space is not a favourite of mine, but just the general sort of idea of them, the sort of the politics and the moral debate that's presented in them, that's present here. And I like that. I like they've actually latched onto something that's very prominent in the Third Doctor era that's good and works. So we've got the era authenticity. And for the first 3 episodes, that's what you've got. You've got this sort of, there's a corporation, there's a bunch of religious, not quite fanatics, but they're quite happy to put their life on the line for their beliefs. And you've got this Mother Finzi who, despite the fact that she's leading a load of people to oblivion, actually seems rather quite nice. And then there are little hints going all the way through it that there's slightly more to her. And everything just flips on its head at the end of the 3rd episode. And the 4th episode is almost something completely different. It's more interested in who Mother Finzi actually is. She's an ex-companion of the Masters, basically. And we kind of, we lose the impact of the sort of ethics of the first 3 episodes. There's a resolution. It's a decent resolution, but I love that 3rd episode cliffhanger. I love who Mother Finzi is. I love everything she does in that episode, but I feel as though it takes away from the story that was being told in the first 3 episodes. They just don't mesh together quite as well as I'd like. It's still great though. It's really good, and it's worth it for that part 3 cliffhanger. That, oh yeah, my teacher, he was called the Master, by the way. That's great. That's cracking. It just sort of, it just completely changes the perspective of everything. But actually, the perspective you had before was interesting enough anyway. But yeah, I really like this one. It just screams confidence. It just goes, hang on, guys, we figured it out. Ignore that first set. We know what we're doing now. Here we go. Anyway, I know it's a favourite of yours, so I'm going to shut up and let you tell us all the good bits.
Okay, settle in. We may be sometime. So yes, as I said before I even start talking about it, it is my favorite Third Doctor audio, hands down. It was the first one I heard, as I've already said. I have not yet heard a story from this range that has beaten it. And I don't think that's just because it was my first story. My first Third Doctor story from Big Finish. So I'll talk about the Mother Finzi twist as its own thing a little bit later on, because it's obviously the core of the story, and there's a lot goes on before that. So you're absolutely right. It is immediately a much more confident story. It wastes absolutely no time. The credits roll, the Doctor and Joe are there, and we're straight into investigating what's wrong with this planet. It's a planet that the Doctor knows. It's a planet the Doctor loves, and he wanted to show Joe. And he gets there, and it's ruined. It's burned out and dying, essentially. So straight away in the first 30 seconds, we've got the Doctor and Joe involved and investigating this mystery. So immediately much more confident, grabs the bull by the horns in a way that neither of the stories in the first set does. And something you'd said as well, it fits absolutely perfectly into season 10. I think for me, this is the ideal setup for a Big Finish story, in that it feels of the era that it's emulating, but it does it on a scale that was not achievable on television in the 1970s on the Doctor Who budget. You know, I do not believe for a second that they could have realized a world like Ephros, this desert blasted heath, as I say, that is covered by the huge extraction sphere that's been built around the planet. No way that was going to get done in a satisfying way on TV. So I think that is I think this is what Big Finish does best. It makes it feel of the era. You get the intergalactic corporation that's such a hallmark of the Third Doctor era, um, but done in a way that could not have been achieved on TV, and it really makes use of the audio medium to do that. So I think that is, for me, the ideal Big Finish. Um, I enjoy you talk about the ethical back and forth. I really enjoy how it approaches the religion that's at the that's at the center of the story, and even though it ultimately turns out the religion has been faked to scam all the followers out of their money. I like how the Doctor and Joe approach it, which is they take a very, oh yes, you have your beliefs and we'll respect that. They're still asking questions around it, but they accept that these people are entitled to their beliefs, and it feels like quite an enlightened way to approach it. It's not, I'm not religious in any way, shape, or form, and this is not me saying, oh, I wish all religion was treated like this, but I think it takes a very mature approach to it, and it works very well. There is the bit where Joe uh, loses her temper with them, and has a go at them for wasting their lives essentially and throwing away their lives in search of a better existence rather than putting their energy into achieving that for themselves in the here and now. That's very cathartic as well. But I think the religious argument and the religious ethics in this are approached very well. Even looking at Mother Finzi's point of view as well, she has a little bit of a go at trying to convert Quail, who's one of the investigators that the Doctor and Joe meet, looking into why the planet's going to explode. Um, but her wee conversation with him at the start is great going the other way, because she says, "Oh, my religion is my life, but it doesn't consume me. I have other interests. I have other things I enjoy doing. It's not my every waking thought." Um, and she has a wee bit of a go at trying to convert him, but ultimately accepts that he has his beliefs and he's entitled to those as well. So again, I just think the way it approaches the whole religious argument is very mature and very well done. I think that's great. Um, absolute. I have to look up his name here, but the guy who plays the overseer, in charge of the corporation, gives a really great performance. It's not a subtle performance, but the script doesn't call for one. And it's really good to listen to. He does a lot of shouting, which does get a little bit grating at times, but that's on the nature of audio. He's a really memorable character, though. And I he's a really funny character. You're meant to think he's a villain, but I'm actually quite happy when he turns good, or turns out to be good, and he's not how he appears and he's not how he comes across. He is a more conscientious character than you think he's going to be. And the Doctor manages to persuade him to make the right decision and throw away his business interests and save the lives of everyone on the planet. Great character, great performance. I think he's fantastic. Um, so obviously the big thing with it is Mother Finzi. And two things to talk about with this. First being that I really enjoy these early Third Doctor adventures because they don't have full access to the era. They haven't done all the recasting that they do down the line. There are certain parts of the era that are closed off to them. And to this day, still, they have not done a master story. What they have done a couple of times is a master adjacent story. And I think the way they work around Roger Delgado's absence and the absence of another actor playing the master by bringing in Mother Finzi as a former companion of his is really well done. And we get a master story without the master with this new character in it, but she fills the gap so well, and I think she's such a brilliant character. Um, so absolute props to the writers and to I think it's Richenda Carey. I don't think I'm pronouncing the name right, but she is superb in this role and carries it off so well. The story would not have worked nearly as well as it did if she wasn't in it. If it was, if she didn't do as well playing Mother Finzi. She fully owns that role and fully owns her place in the story. because it all hinges on her. Obviously, she's standing in for the master. It's not an easy thing to do, but she accomplishes it extremely well and is utterly brilliant in doing it. And then the reason the story obviously has stuck in my head so much is because of the twist and that build up to the reveal. I still rank as one of my favorite Big Finish moments. I know I'm gushing about this story, but I really do enjoy it just that much. The build up to the part 3 cliffhanger, as you said earlier, there's little bits have been seeded in the run up to this, and to go back and put it in the context of the time it was released, this was released in the run up to the Anya Kingdom stories in the Fourth Doctor adventures. And I was vaguely aware, because I think they said, I don't think they had revealed the details of Anya Kingdom or Anne Kelso at that stage. But I was vaguely aware, I think they had said that they had recorded stories with a new Fourth Doctor companion. And I thought this was tying in with that. So listening to this, I'm aware that there's going to be a new companion she's been created for the Fourth Doctor adventures. And Mother Finzi starts talking about uh her wise man, and that is compared to Joe and the Doctor's relationship. And I was listening to this thinking, oh, has she traveled with the Doctor as well? Is she a companion we haven't met yet from the future? Is this maybe the new Fourth Doctor companion making an early bird appearance? Because it sells. I think it's leading you down the route that you're meant to think this is a companion of the Doctor, because just compared so much to the Doctor's relationship with Joe. She recognizes the word TARDIS at one point, and picks up on that word in conversation with the Doctor and with Joe. At one stage, so you're already sort of thinking, she knows what a TARDIS is. She knows about the Time Lords. And the way she's talking to Joe about the Doctor did make me think that she was a companion of the Doctor that we hadn't met yet, and was going to be like, I thought this was maybe a companion of the Doctor who's had all of her adventures with the Doctor and was retired and is now doing this instead. And this was maybe going to reveal near the end she has traveled with the Doctor in the past. We get that cliffhanger, and the first time I listened, I realized what was happening about 20 seconds before the reveal dropped. And that 20 seconds of waiting for the word master, I was going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, this is brilliant. So I think that I have to put my hand on my heart and admit I was completely fooled by the Mother Finzi character and that performance, and all the little hints that made me think she was a companion of the Doctor. So bloody satisfying when it's revealed that she is actually a companion of the Master. I like that it's Joe that gets that revelation as well. It works perfectly that she's mirrored against Mother Finzi, and you get what is a companion of the Doctor like versus what is the Master's companion like. And the little scene where she sort of narrates over her adventures with the Master, and all the things they did together. That's great at conjuring up Roger Delgado without having him actually do it. It conjures him so well with that wee line where he left the council chamber, straightened his cuffs, closed the door, and locked them all in. That wee bit about straightening his cuffs just conjures Roger Delgado to your mind immediately, and you picture him for the rest of that scene with her and or with him and Mother Finzi, doing all the crimes, committing all their crimes together. So I think this is a brilliant story. I think it is the best possible way they could have done a Master story in the early Third Doctor adventures without recasting the Master. And obviously Roger Delgado was not alive to play the Master anymore. But I think it was a brilliant way of including such a pillar of the Third Doctor's era in the Master without actually being able to use him. Yeah, I love it. I'm 10 out of 10. Brilliant story. Fooled me completely. I love it. To this day, it is still my favorite Third Doctor adventure.
You're right. It is one of Big Finish's best cliffhangers. It is such a great moment, such a great reveal, and like going into it for the first time, even though the set had been out for quite a while, it was a complete surprise. I didn't know that was coming. I didn't know she was secretly a wrong and of anything. And that cliffhanger just hit me, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, you've done it. Well done." Um, it is an interesting point that they've still not done a master story. The closest we've got, I guess, is the River Song set during season 7, where John Culshaw pops up as the Delgado master towards the end, but only meets River. I wonder if it'll happen. It's got to be tempting. Like they have a
Mm.
recast Delgado. That is a thing Big Finish has and has had for a few years.
I've always got the impression they've been slightly hesitant to use John Culshaw's Delgado because I don't truthfully think it's as strong as some of his other impressions. I don't think it's nearly as good as his Brigadier. I don't think it's as good as his Anthony Ainley impression. So I don't know whether he's only ever done that master. He's only ever done the Roger Delgado master for a little short cameo, as far as I know, for that wee short cameo in um the River Song set. There was that companion chronicle recently. Actually, I don't know how much of an element the master actually is in that or not. You can tell me because I think
N-
you've heard it. But
Not
the only
loads and
stories
loads, but enough.
okay,
There's a short
but
trip as well. One of the
there's a short trip.
Time Lord
There's an audio.
Victorious.
There's Terror of the Master, which was the wee audio novel included
Oh yeah,
on Masterful, but they have not used, to my knowledge, John Culshaw's Roger Delgado impression in a full cast story for any length of time. So I think they maybe are still a bit hesitant to use him for whatever reason. I don't think, hand on my heart, I would be thrilled to have him play the Master in a Third Doctor adventure now, purely because he would be doing double time as the Brigadier as well. And I don't think it holds up when you have the same actor performing multiple roles, because you can hear the similarity in his voice. You know that you can't wholly remove John Culshaw's voice. He can sound very like someone else, but there's always an undertone of his own voice in there, and I don't think that would work having the Brigadier play against the Master. No, you can do a story without the Brigadier, certainly, but as I say, I don't think that impression is just as strong as some of his other ones are. Um, and do you know, I wish they would. I wish this had been done ages ago, because I think now they probably will go down the route of a recast Delgado. I wish they had used Jeffrey Beavers as the Master, and I wish we had got a little bit towards the end, even with maybe Sarah Jane Smith, set it in season 11 and as a little prelude to the Fourth Doctor's era, have a have a non-injured version of the Jeffrey Beavers Master, because that exists. We know that we know he was an incarnation of the Master on his own, or before his injury, that made him into the version we saw on TV and Big Finish have featured very prominently over the years. The Two Masters has him as that uninjured version of himself, and it's still Jeffrey Beavers playing him. I wish that had been a thing in the Third Doctor adventures. I wish he had been the 3DA's Master.
yeah, I could get on board with that quite happily. I mean, and that's what they've done in the Fourth Doctor adventures as well. They've had it be the Beavers Master. So yeah, if they were going to do Third Doctor and Master, which I honestly think they should, I think they should just regenerate
It's
Delgado.
very overdue.
Yeah, just regenerate Delgado off screen. That's fine. We know he regenerates into Beavers. We're all okay with it. Let's do it. But yeah, we could have it, and I don't just think we should have it. I think we will have it. I think we'll have it sooner or later. Just before we started recording, I said that we've not had Liz Shaw traveling in the TARDIS yet, but we know that's coming. That is going to happen. It will be a Third Doctor adventure one day, and I think a Master story is going to end up in there sooner or later as well. I think they're just twiddling the thumbs on how they're going to do it.
It's very overdue happening, I think. I think it's the one big pillar of the Third Doctor era that they haven't still done as a full story on its own. Obviously, yes, it is an element of the River Song set, but we still haven't had a Third Doctor versus the Master story in its own right. and that feels odd for a range that has done every other major pillar of that era, and every other major component of that era has been done. It feels weird and overdue that we haven't had the master properly.
Yeah, but we'll get there. I'm sure we'll get there.
But just to go back, that's not a slight in any way whatsoever on the Transcendence of Ephros. It is, it's one I'm sure we will discuss in time. It is also an element of a later story in the Third Doctor Adventures, where the Master's lurking around in the background, but we never see him. But both that story and the Transcendence of Ephros do their thing really well and manage to accomplish a master story without having the master in it. And that's a really hard line to walk. That both do it very well.
Yeah, it has been handled well, both occasions. Should we move on to the Hidden Realm?
Yes.
Our last story for discussion today. So I have to be honest, I have definitely heard these two sets we've discussed today at least twice before. Without any shadow of a doubt, I have listened to these two sets twice before listening to them again last week, preparing for this. And the Hidden Realm, I couldn't have told you a single thing going into it. Not a thing. Couldn't remember it. It just, I don't know why. My brain had just totally wiped it. I'd written it off as not very memorable. Not perhaps I didn't enjoy it back then. Well, I don't know. But it was like listening to a new story, and it was brilliant. I really enjoyed it, and I can't quite believe that it hadn't stood out to me before. Obviously, the revelation in Transcendence of Ephros had just blown my mind so completely that I'd completely forgotten anything I listened to for the following few hours after that. Which is a real shame, because the talking point of this set is always going to be the end of part 3 of Ephros and Mother Frenzy and how it's about the story without the Master and all that. Actually, the Hidden Realm is a damn good story on its own. Maybe it gets a little bit 60s B movie in places, but that's what it's trying to do. It's another good Joe story. The Doctor does disappear for a good chunk of this one, and Joe gets to shine, and we meet a family member of Joe's, and all this kind of thing. So yeah, she gets a good one in this one. End of the day, it's a daft bit of body swap stuff. It maybe jumps the shark a little bit with, Nazi war criminals that have been hiding out in Buenos Aires and that kind of thing. It does get a little bit, like I say, 60s B movie, bit silly in places, but it's fun and it's memorable and it's got good characters, and I'm actually quite cross with myself and not appreciating this one previously, because there's a lot to enjoy in there, and it shouldn't be as overshadowed by Ephros as it is. What do you think of this one? You liked it, didn't you?
I really do like it. I think it's very underrated. As you said, it gets very overshadowed, I think, by Transcendence and the Mother Finsey reveal. As that's always, as you said, going to be what people are going to talk about first and foremost when they talk about Volume 2. The Hidden Realm is just pure pulpy goodness. It sets out to be that sort of slightly hokey 60s style B movie, as you put it. It's invasion of the Nazi body snatchers. That is if you could reduce the concept behind the story to one sentence, it's invasion of the Nazi body snatchers. You immediately know what that's going to be like. It never tries to be any more or less than that. But I think it acquits itself really well. It's trying to be that pulpy classic sci-fi thriller. Something that really helps the story is it has a fantastic soundtrack that it's this quaint, the story's this quaint little English village. Parts of it and some of its characters are very twee. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's by design. It's deliberate. They're meant to be very sweet and harmless, and actually they are evil. And the soundtrack really leans into that. It's very sweet and daydreamy, but there's an unsettling tone to it that puts you on edge, and really plays into the atmosphere that the story's trying to evoke, and it does it so well. The reason I think that's a huge element in why the story works as well as it does, because it has that fantastic soundtrack. Um, Miss Barnett, this character at the center of the story, who is assisting Overseer Zim in stealing the bodies of the Bramfield residents and the people who are passing through Bramfield. Um, she's fantastic. It's this wee harmless old lady who wouldn't hurt a fly, but she's listening in on everyone's conversations. She's helping the aliens conduct their body snatcher scheme. She is great. I don't like that she gets away. She doesn't get away scot free at the end, as the doctor says. She's given up her whole life on the promise of another life and being put into a younger body and getting, this eternal youth that she's been seeking with overseers over the years. And the doctor says, "Oh, she's not going to get that. She's old. She's going to, pass away at some stage soon. She's thrown away her whole life. That's punishment enough." Don't quite buy that. I don't really buy that at all. But
Maybe Unit picked her up a couple of days later.
yeah, I imagine that probably
Or
would have had to have
headcanon that. I
happened.
I got really strong sort of like Hot Fuzz vibes from her. It's that kind of thing, the sinister old person in the quaint
Yeah,
English village. There is something very
it's
Hot Fuzz about it.
It's such a Doctor Who thing. It's such a 1970s Doctor Who thing. The quaint little English village with the sweet old lady, and the sweet old lady's out to get you. Um,
Yeah.
so again, it's one of those classic Doctor Who tropes that is done really well here. Um, to hark back to what we were talking about earlier about what the Third Doctor adventures were meant to do originally. Joe gets Joe gets centered quite a bit again, because the Doctor gets taken over by the Nazi Gruppenführer character, who he sort of hops around a few bodies in this. He takes over the policeman at one stage, and then he gets put into the Doctor's head. He's a great character as well. I love the relationship between him and Zim, where she's like a service provider and he's an irate customer. I think that it almost makes what's happening a little bit too banal and a bit too mundane and ordinary. But it's at the heart of the story that this is a business that's being operated for the sake of these people who want new identities. And Richard Earl plays. Richard Earl has to play a couple of different roles in this as the detective, but he's possessed by a few different people, and he differentiates them so well and plays them each so well. But the Doctor, obviously, as I say, gets taken over, and Joe has to be the one who's solving the problem again. I think that's great. I love how much Katie Manning gets to do in these stories. Whenever that sort of thing happens. And I like that she gets to be the main character for a bit. And it's not all about the Doctor. So yeah, I really enjoy it. It's always going to be overshadowed by the transcendence of Ephros, and you do have to take it as its own thing, man. But it is I don't think it's just as good as Transcendence. I think Transcendence is the better story out of the two. I think I would still rate it above Hidden Realm. The Hidden Realm is still great, and it fully deserves to be talked about in its own right rather than just as part of the set. And it deserves to not be overshadowed by the other story in the set. It's really good. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, it's like I say, I feel as though I've kind of deprived myself of actually quite a fun Doctor Who story because I don't know why I have just not retained it. I've not remembered it, but I have to have heard it at least twice. I just obviously wasn't paying attention. I'd say the same about what's the story in the next set? Is it the Hidden Realm?
This is the Hidden Realm we're talking
This
about
is
now.
the Hidden Realm. There we go. A Storm of the Horror Facts. There you go. I get them mixed up. I genuinely get them
Yes.
mixed up because it's two Third Doctor stories, second in the set, Earth based, that I don't remember. And I've literally just gone and done it now. Storm of the Horror Facts is the one with the disappearing unit soldier that was there all along, but not anymore, isn't it?
Yes, that's the one.
Yes, that's the one. So I remember that one, but Hidden Realm, I just didn't. Um, yeah, it's good. It's a good story. This is a really solid set, actually. I've come to appreciate this set a lot more. I've always appreciated Efros. I don't quite love it as much as you. I think it's a 8 or a 9 out of 10. I really like it. Um, and I would struggle to name a better third Doctor story. Like, I like the Gulf. I do really like the Gulf. Um,
I think
and
that
I
I
need,
think the Gulf
yeah,
is the one that comes closest for me.
yeah. I probably need to re-listen to sort of the season 7 set once again. I remember really enjoying, I think it was Intelligence for War when it came out, but I've not listened to it since it came out, which is obviously something I'm going to rectify in the next couple of months if we're doing this. But yeah, like the only one that really springs to mind at this point is the Gulf, and I'm looking forward to getting to that one, even though it's a little way off yet. Big fan of Primal too. I mean, I'm just listing stories I'm looking forward to discussing in future episodes at this point.
I'm really excited to do. I'm really excited to do this series of we're going to do about the Third Doctor adventures, because there's some of them that I come back to a lot. I come back to Transcendence a lot. I come back to Hidden Realm a lot. Some that I don't come back to so much, either because I haven't enjoyed them at the time, or um for this just for different reasons, that maybe they're not ones I've done as I haven't done maybe from or I originally listened, and I'm looking forward to hearing those again. I do think it's a great series to talk about and do in order like this, because it's a range that has evolved a lot, and it is not. If you look at where the range is now compared to how it started off, it's in a very different place now, and it looks very different to what it was originally. And I'm excited to talk about how it changes over time and how those changes have come about. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's probably the range that has most noticeably changed with, when Big Finish basically went full box sets, when they started going to every classic Doctor's getting a box set or two every year kind of thing. Basically when the monthly range ended and a few other things. And I think that, yeah, it really did sort of change direction completely around that point. Um, and in some ways for the better, in some ways we absolutely wouldn't get a story like The Hidden Realm now, or even Transcendence of Ephros. It doesn't fit the format that they are doing now. So
It
I
doesn't.
think that, no,
I do think I wasn't sure whether to talk about this now or whether to talk about it when we get down the line. It might be something to revisit when we get to the box set here as well. But I I think with these stories, these earlier stories, there's a certain restriction to them in that they don't have access to the full era. They don't have the Brigadier. They can't really do unit stories as such without the Brigadier. Um, not in the way they were on TV anyway. Um, but that drove them to make decisions and to do things like the Mother Finsey reveal, and to do stories like the Hidden Realm where it's just the Doctor and Joe on their own. They can't rely on Unit in the same way, because I think there's a bit in the Hidden Realm about Joe not wanting to call in Unit, because if the Body Snatchers managed to get into Unit and get someone into Unit, that would be catastrophic. So there are certain restrictions that led to really creative decisions in these earlier stories that you don't really get later on. And I do think, as nice as it is that we've got characters like the Brigadier, and we do have more full access to the Third Doctor's era and characters from it, we've lost we've lost something that made the Third Doctor adventures feel like their own thing.
it's the same kind of innovation that very, very, very early Big Finish
Yes.
monthly range
Yes.
had, when not everyone was on board and, okay, well, we've only got Nissa from the Fifth Doctor's era, or Turlo occasionally, and
Yeah.
this kind of, and they kind of had to, okay, well, let's fill the gap in between Time Flight and Arc of Infinity and do stuff with that. And Obviously, we got Perry and Erim out a bit. We got some wonderful like companions, Evelyn and all of that, and it was all because of who was available on what day and what they had access to.
I think
Yeah,
I think none of these stories are groundbreaking. None of them are mold breakers. You know, there's no shirt sew equivalent in the Third Doctor adventures. You know, none of them are anything other than just a really solid Doctor Who story. Not a bad thing at all. I come to Big Finish because I want to hear a really solid Doctor Who story, and that's what you get. But I think a lot of these earlier stories are tighter and they're more disciplined, and they are uh they are I think some of the later stories are maybe not as tight and disciplined because they don't have to write around the absence of the Brigadier or the absence of, you know, not being able to do a full scale unit story. I, I and you know, we don't just get the Doctor and Joe or the Doctor and Sarah going into space for an adventure anymore. There's always, you know, it feels like there's always we're very tied to Earth and unit and the Brigadier now, I think, by comparison. So I do think, as I've said, I think it lost something. It lost a degree of innovation whenever it opened up a bit more later, and I still really like these early adventures because they feel so much their own thing compared to what the range becomes later on.
yeah, yeah, and I know exactly what you mean. We will revisit this another time because we've talked an awful lot about the Third
We
Doctor
have.
adventures. Now we probably need to sign off, but yeah, we'll definitely revisit this and sort of look at it at how the range evolves as we go on. What I will say though is obviously we're going to go away and listen to the next two sets now, and we'll come back and talk about those in a few weeks' time. Um, they do play it a bit safer because next time we'll have talked about a Dalek story, a Monk story, and a Cyberman story. So
Yes.
those those classic elements are going to creep in pretty bloody quickly. So yes, we'll leave it there. But it's great. I'm really glad we're doing this. I'm really glad we are talking about this range because I think even though it has changed and so on, I still think it's a very, very unique range. I don't think there's another Doctor at Big Finish that is quite getting the same treatment as the Third Doctor. And it's going to be good exploring that as we go through. But for now, let's say thank you and goodbye. Thank you and goodbye, Connor.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be doing this.
And we'll be back to do more of it very soon. Goodbye now.
Goodbye.
Say goodbye as Pertwee.
Ta-da.